Good evening, everybody. One way or another, the United States and China seem to be edging ever closer to confrontation over the release of the deadly Wuhan virus on the unsuspecting world by China and the Chinese Communist Party's deliberate and deceitful cover-up. Chinese leader Xi Jinping today escalating tensions between the two countries, calling on his nation's military to, quote, explore ways and means of training and preparing for war, end quote. Xi's comments come after a recent internal Chinese report warning Beijing they need to be prepared for the potential of armed conflict with the United States. Chinese Communist Party officials have made it clear over recent days they will utilize the Wuhan virus pandemic they helped create to achieve their goal of global domination. China's foreign minister telling the United States to stop what it calls its wishful thinking of trying to change China. All of this to these actions so far have been diplomatic, measured, even mooted. President Trump and his administration threatening to impose economic sanctions against China should they choose to continue their provocative rhetoric and actions against the Western world.
Secretary Pompeo would likely be unable to certify that Hong Kong maintains a high degree of autonomy, and if that happens, there will be sanctions that will be imposed on Hong Kong and China. It's hard to see how Hong Kong could remain the Asian financial center that it's become if China takes over.
And for more reaction from the White House and the latest on China's crackdown against democracy in Hong Kong, we turn to our own Susan Lee in New York.
The Chinese foreign minister says that the U.S. and China are on the brink of a Cold War over coronavirus and what he calls political foreign forces supporting the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement. More protests planned Wednesday outside of Hong Kong's government buildings downtown.
He has for the country, and that would be a risk that would absolutely be unacceptable to the Chinese Communist Party. But nonetheless, he is pushing the envelope, and thankfully so. This administration has a comprehensive plan to deal with it, not just economically, but politically and also militarily, and also deal with the information operations. And I think I got to lean our shoulders into more of it than what we have. And obviously, because of what has been taking place recently, it's got our attention, it's got our government's attention, it's got our president's attention, and it's got the world's attention.
And in the Pacific, critically important how much force we bring to bear in that region and how much of our total might we apportion to the Pacific. It looks as though we're going to have to concentrate a considerable amount of our fleet as perhaps never before.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that, Lou. You put your finger on one of the problems that we have is China has added to their military capacity to a point where they put a lot of our systems, military systems, at risk and vulnerable. So that a couple of things we're going to have to do. One is reposition forces and add a greater priority to the Asia-Pacific, as you're suggesting. And then the second piece of that, and Secretary Esper is on top of this, and that is to accelerate advanced technology programs that will create the kind of military deterrence that we want to have in that part of the world, and we don't want China making any foolish steps because we don't have it. That'll take a while to get, but fortunately we've had 3 solid budgets, and we need a number of years more to be able to complete. But fortunately we've had 3 solid budgets, and we need a number of years more to be able to complete those advanced technology systems that we have to bring on board. We're going to need that kind of funding. If we don't get it, then jeopardy is going to be around the corner.
Flashpoints as of right now. Clearly Taiwan, as has been the case over decades. Perhaps North Korea. Perhaps some of the other nations of Southeast Asia. Your thoughts about where the United States is likely to be tested first and foremost?
Yeah. Well, I think it's right in front of us now with Hong Kong. I think Xi's calculation is that he's no longer going to go along with the facade that the local government in Hong Kong is really in charge. They're now in charge, and that's what this new law that was mentioned in the introduction is all about, which means they can arrest anybody, anytime, on any charge, is what that law permits. And the second thing, it deals with foreign interference. They can deport any foreigner without a lot of cause. They'll come up with some phony excuse, but that law gives them that authority, to include the media. So, and China is risking this, and we have to understand this. China, if it comes to it, they're going to own Hong Kong, and if they have to lose the financial hub to own it and make sure that as a result of the protest in Hong Kong, there's no pushback on the mainland, they will do that because they want to protect their regime and their Chinese Communist Party at all cost, to include risking that loss. Does that impact them economically? Yes, but it doesn't bring them to their knees either. So this is a calculated move on their part to really begin to take control of Hong Kong and change it from something that we knew in the past. And Taiwan is another issue. President Tsai has been elected there, Lou. She's an anti-Chinese Communist Party president. Right. She was decisively elected. She's had the strongest support the country's ever had from the United States. China is going to put more pressure on them as well. That'll be another flashpoint for us.
General, thank you. Stock exchange reopened for the first time in 2 months. All three major indexes moving higher. It was a big rally. The New York Exchange back open just in time for that big rally. The Dow up 530 points. The S&P up 36. The Nasdaq up 16. Volume on the big board, 5.9 billion shares. Crude oil up more than 2.5%, $34.11 a barrel. And new reports suggest radical Dem Joe Biden planning to use the Wuhan virus as a way to take on the president about the economy. But according to Politico, a resurgent Trump economy is, quote, the general election scenario that Democrats are dreading, end quote. In a tweet today, President Trump said this: stock market up big. Dow crosses 25,000. S&P 500 over 3,000. States should open ASAP. The transition to greatness has started ahead of schedule. There will be ups and downs, but next year will be one of the best ever. Up next, radical Dems and rhinos like Mitt Romney make a push for more fraudulent mail-in voting. Why would they do that? Maybe they want to cheat? I don't know. We'll take it up. Much more right after this quick break. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton joins us. Stay with us. We'll be right back. The Republican National Committee and two other Republican groups are suing California over its mail-out ballot plan. In the lawsuit, the groups claim the mail-in ballots would be sent to inactive voters, including citizens who have moved or who have died. Meanwhile, a Clinton-appointed judge's ruling could allow felons in Florida to vote in the upcoming election without having to pay any fees as required by law. U.S. District Judge Robert Hinkle, Clinton-appointed judge, ruled that state law requires felons to pay legal fees before voting is, quote-unquote, unconstitutional. That ruling could potentially add thousands of more voters to the rolls. And President Trump swearing in John Ratcliffe today as the new director of national intelligence. Ratcliffe taking over from Richard Grenell, who served in an acting capacity for the past 3 months, providing unprecedented transparency as he did so. And today, Grenell declassified a new bunch of Russia probe documents, including transcripts of phone calls that the incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak had in December 2016. This follows Grinnell's actions, remarkable historic actions. In 3 months, he declassified the list of Obama-era officials who requested to unmask. General Flynn released more than 6,000 pages of House Intelligence Committee interview transcripts, declassified the email of former National Security Advisor Susan Rice that she sent to herself on the president's inauguration day, and declassifying more than 36 redacted footnotes from the Department of Justice Inspector General's report on intelligence community failures. Well, joining us tonight is Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch, and Rick Grinnell. Tom, and I know that you would agree, I mean, he is historic. What he has done in 3 months is breathtaking. The nation is truly in his debt.
It sure is. And when you compare the other agency heads of the Trump administration, they pale in comparison in terms of transparency. Secretary of State Pompeo, the State Department is a disaster. The DOJ and the FBI are disasters in terms of transparency. For instance, we asked the State Department about the Samantha Power unmaskings. They said they couldn't even tell us the number of unmaskings because it would be a violation of national security to do so. And of course, DOJ and FBI literally are breaking FOIA law by withholding documents from us and requiring us to sue. And then when we sue, they stall it and they stall the release of the documents or pretend that the documents aren't subject to FOIA in the case of text messages. And Grinnell shows that when you have agency leadership, you can get transparency, and I just hope Barr and Wray and Pompeo look and start producing as well.
Well, it's really surprising to hear you criticizing those other departments, particularly the State Department, and I'd like to know what can be done here. You say it's a violation of FOIA law. They're claiming it's against the law for them to release the material. I'm going to guess which side you would suggest is correct here, but why in the world couldn't this thing be adjudicated and resolved, or the president just simply order it done?
Oh, I think the president should order agency-wide disclosures or administration-wide disclosures, certainly of the Russiagate documents. I know he's pushed for that, and of course the deep state resists that. There's always a reason not to release information, and we're seeing with the Grinnell disclosures, the classification had no good faith basis. There was no national security reasons to hide the names of the unmaskers, no national security reasons to cover up that Susan Rice email, no national security reasons to hide the transcript information, and Grinnell came in and blew it all open. And the secrecy is to protect misconduct and, frankly, criminal behavior from being exposed.
And let's turn to California, the lawsuits, Judicial Watch, the Republican National Committee, mail-in ballots. You say it's pure fraud in potentiality, certainly. What's going to be the resolution there?
Well, the Constitution doesn't let the governor of a state just send out ballots and change the law of a state. The legislature under the Constitution has to change the rules. And California state law doesn't even allow Newsom to do that. That's why we sued in court last week on behalf of both voters and a candidate, Darrell Issa, who's running for a seat again in Congress. Look, if you want your vote to be secure and safe, go vote in person. And Governor Newsom flooding the system with 20 million ballots is an open invitation to ballot fraud. We know we have a settlement with Los Angeles County. Los Angeles County has agreed to remove up to 1.6 million names from the rolls that shouldn't be there. We know that California's voting lists are notoriously dirty. We've got the documents and the information showing that to be the case. So if you want voter fraud, if you want chaos on Election Day, this is what you'll get with this out-of-control decision by Mr. Newsom. On top of that, you've got this ballot harvesting rule in California that is also an open invitation to not only fraud, but intimidation. When you're voting outside the polling place, the protections are weak for secure elections and to protect those who want to vote from being intimidated.
And Tom, you know that people are going to say it's California for crying out loud. It's nothing but the usual left coast, left wing, Democratic. Let them stack up all the votes they want. What difference does it make? Pay attention to the states where it does make a difference. Your response to those people.
Well, if it's your vote that's being stolen as a result of voter fraud, you may think otherwise. And certainly California has Senate races and House races and races for mayor and other localities that would be impacted as well. And of course, it's a state-by-state battle. This is not just in California. Nancy Pelosi, for instance, passed a bill that would nationalize Newsom's approach, upend the voter ID laws in 35 states. And have ballot harvesting at a national scale. Look, our elections are being put at risk here.
And by the way, I mean, you've got 16 states where this is being Perkins Coie is the great Democratic law firm. Great is, by the way, I'm using it in the facetious sense. I mean, they're leading an action to disenfranchise voters across the country, are they not?
Well, that's right. If your vote isn't going to be counted in this circus-like process, your civil rights are being violated. You know, I'm tired of this voter fraud issue. The left using it to attack those of us who support election security as being against people being able to vote. We want to protect the right to vote by making it secure. And when you set up a system, and this is what they're trying to do, they oppose voter ID, they oppose cleaning up the rolls, and obviously they got the ballot harvesting and voter mail scheme going on. That's setting up the field for 2020 and beyond.
Yeah, and 2020 is 5 months away right now. And to be very clear, it's about electoral integrity, and anything that assures integrity of our electoral system, it seems the radical Dems oppose mightily. Tom Fitton, always good to see you. Talk to you later in the broadcast. Appreciate it. Up next, China's so-called Batwoman. So-called. She's the Batwoman. She says the Wuhan virus is, just the tip of an iceberg, if you can mix a metaphor when it comes to bats. We'll take that up. What's being done about it in Washington? Well, we'll talk with Senator Marsha Blackburn, who's doing something about it. Right after these quick messages, we'll be right back. A Chinese virologist is known as China's Batwoman because she works with bats to get viruses. The Wuhan virus, she says, is just the tip of the iceberg, whatever that means. Dr. Schur, the deputy director of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, telling state media new contagious, deadly viruses like the Wuhan virus are constantly being discovered. It's unclear whether she was making a threat or offering a warning or just what. Well, joining us now, Senator Marsha Blackburn, the great state of Tennessee. Senator, great to have you with us. You've been giving the Chinese some things to think about, including the Stop the COVID-19 Act, in which American citizens would be able to sue for damages. The Chinese don't like that, and they're actually threatening you and a few other folks, aren't they?
Well, they have said they think they should sanction me, whatever that means. But I tell you, I think that I agree with President Trump. We should be sanctioning them and not take that off the table as we look at how to deal with China. And Lou, I have to tell you, when you have the virologist who is termed the Batwoman talking about this is the tip of the iceberg, we have to bear in mind China has still not let the CDC or the WHO into that Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, they want to say they didn't start this, that it wasn't from Wuhan. It's the Americans' fault or the Italians' fault or something else. The whole world knows that it came from Wuhan, and it is time for the Chinese Communist Party to begin to be transparent about this and to stop lying and hiding information and stealing our technology and everything else.
Well, I agree with you. It's $600 billion worth of intellectual property they steal every year. And we have watched almost 100,000 Americans killed by this virus that they didn't warn the world about. You can argue about whether they engineered it, whether they authored it, but its origin was Wuhan, and it was the Chinese who unleashed it on the world and didn't say a word to a soul. They're responsible for every death, every infection around the world, are they not?
They are, and that is why we introduced the Stop COVID Act, because U.S. citizens who have experienced loss of life and livelihood in their families, they need the ability to take the Chinese Communist Party to court and hold them accountable and responsible and seek some remuneration for what they have experienced. And so through the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, with the provision of biological agents, COVID-19 can be classified as such. This is something that was unleashed on the world. China knew for 51 days they had this thing. President Xi knew for 6 days they had this, and they let it grow to a pandemic before they started to talk about it. They had 3,000 people that were infected with COVID-19 before they said anything.
And they permitted them to travel around the world, even as they cut off domestic travel in their own country. I want to close out here by getting your reaction to President Xi speaking to his party's National Congress, telling the People's Liberation Army to get ready for war, to prepare for war. Your reaction to President Xi and his inelegant, bellicose rhetoric?
Their goal is global domination. They want to be the world's superpower militarily through the economy. That is why we have the Belt and Road Initiative coming out of China. That's why they have the 100-year marathon. As they look at this, they want to defeat the United States at every single turn. But I tell you what, I think so many people have awakened through this COVID-19 experience. And you're going to see America recapture our dominance in manufacturing, whether it is telecommunications or pharmaceuticals. You are going to see us push forward with doing what we need to do militarily to be certain that great power competition is where we take the lead. In telecommunications, with 5G technologies, with artificial intelligence, I think that a lot of people have kind of started to say, you know what? They are not a competitor. They are an adversary. This is a Cold War footing. It is time for us to defeat them.
Senator Marsha Blackburn, thanks for being with us. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Up next, more judicial activism from Clinton-appointed Judge Emmett Sullivan. The latest nonsense that he's conjured up to resist the Department of Justice motion to set General Michael Flynn free. Investigative journalist John Solomon with us next. We'll be right back. Breaking news now. The House of Representatives is scheduled to debate the Senate's version of the FISA reform bill tomorrow. The Senate sending that bill to the House with an amendment requiring FISA court judges to appoint a neutral third-party observer in any case involving a, quote, sensitive investigative matter. Now think about that. These are all sensitive investigative matters that appear before that court. And another judge, Judge Emmett Sullivan, hiring an outside attorney, Beth Wilkinson, to defy the Justice Department's request to dismiss all charges against General Michael Flynn. We've checked. We've gotten no response as to whether taxpayers are paying for this representation for the judge. But we do have a few questions, including, why isn't Chief Justice John Roberts taking Sullivan off the case? Sullivan lobbied to get James Comey, by the way, a $100,000 speaking fee in 2017. at Sullivan's alma mater, Howard University. Howard has received, by the way, almost $100 million from the Department of Education, federal taxpayer money, since $100 million since President Trump took office. It's nice to know how they're spending it. Well, joining us tonight is John Solomon, award-winning investigative reporter, editor-in-chief of Just the News. And John, good to have you with us. First, your reaction to hiring a high-powered attorney like Wilkinson to represent a judge in a case. What's going on here?
I'll tell you, I've covered the judiciary for 30 years. I can't remember another time where a judge whose ruling is being questioned, whose judgment is being questioned, not because he's under investigation, but just simply because of his jurisprudence, needed to hire a lawyer. I think it shows the sort of trouble that Judge Sullivan finds himself in. He's dug himself into a hole because he's in opposition to the Supreme Court's own rulings on what to do in these cases. And I think the lawyer is just another sideshow. At the end of the day, the courts are going to come down on the side of the law, and that requires that this conviction and charges be dismissed against General Flynn.
John, I've got a lot here I want to talk to you about here tonight, as usual. But I've got to ask you, why in the world doesn't the Chief Justice just intervene here? This is ridiculous. This judge is mocking him, the entire court, and by the way, the Department of Justice and the Constitution. Just as a side note, this is outrageous. Why should this take even a week to sort out?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, right? The law is clear. The wheels of jurisprudence often turn slowly, slower than on my patient's level and other patients' level. But I think at the end of the day, the appellate court has the handle on this. They know what they're going to do. They're expecting the judge to give some response, and then they're going to tell the judge, go back and do your job. I think we're only a few more weeks from a resolution. I think this will play out pretty quickly.
You know, it occurs to me that these particularly the federal judiciary, really does need to join the 21st century. This is preposterous that this has to go on. A great new article in justthenews.com, and I want to turn to that. And I'm referring to the text between Strzok and, as usual, Lisa Page, putting right. Obama in Obamagate. Just before the inauguration of President Trump, in which there was an expression, and I can't tell if it was a genuine concern or if they were building a record, concern that they would have to share intelligence with General Michael Flynn, the new National Security Advisor. Are you kidding?
Yeah, well, even more damaging. They knew what was going on. You have to set the table here. It's 2 weeks before President Trump takes office. It's about the time that the FBI agent who investigated Flynn for 5 months has come up with the decision, no more investigation, no criminality, no counterintelligence threat. We should shut the case down. And at that very moment, someone in the White House is seeking the Flynn transcripts. And the FBI is debating, should we give them to the White House? And what you see in these text messages, which, by the way, I confirmed this afternoon, Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn have never gotten these text messages. I got them. The defense has never got them. Another oversight by the Justice Department. But they're actually saying, listen, if we give these transcripts to Obama and the White House, there's going to be partisan axes to grind. People are going to take vengeance out on Mike Flynn. That's not what an FBI investigation is supposed to be for. That's not what unmasking is supposed to be for. It's an extraordinary moment in time where the FBI realizes if they give the transcripts of Mike Flynn to the White House, there's going to be partisan gamemanship played, and that's not what should have happened.
Well, a fascinating tale, as always, in justthenews.com, and we're grateful to you for sharing it here tonight and sharing with us further the wisdom and insights of John Solomon. He's coming back with Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton as we take up the ramblings of the deep state and radical Dems and what they're conjuring now. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Tom and John in just one moment. A new poll shows 45% of Americans now say it's likely the Obama administration improperly spied on the Trump campaign. These findings by Just the News and Rasmussen also show 43% think it's not likely. 80% of Republicans believe it's true. Just 19% of Democrats believe it's true. And there you have it, the grand divide. We're back now with Judicial Watch's Tom Fitton, editor-in-chief of Just the News, John Solomon. And I want to start with John Ratcliffe, now the Director of National Intelligence, running the show after Rick Grenell's extraordinary 3 months as the acting director. Tom, what do you expect to be the difference? Do you expect that, for example, we're going to see a lot more declassification and the public's right to know honored by the intelligence community rather than frustrated?
I hope so. Mr. Ratcliffe now has Grenell's lead to follow. There are these documents that Grenell just declassified, including the transcripts of the wiretaps on General Flynn, which in my view are just it's just an evidence of a crime. They shouldn't have been wiretapping Flynn's communications. As soon as they heard that he was talking to the ambassador, they should have turned the tape off. So that material needs to come out. You know, we had sued for it years ago, couldn't get it, and now Grenell's finally released it, and now John Ratcliffe needs to take the baton, the transparency baton, and further disclose the details of Obamagate. And if he doesn't do it, the president should order him and anyone else involved to declassify. Certainly, it's already been declassified, so there's really no good reason to withhold it other than politics. I don't think Ratcliffe is going to withhold it.
Well, you, John, managed to get material that the defense attorney and General Flynn couldn't get for themselves. What do you expect?
I would expect the trend of increased transparency and declassification and release of information to accelerate. When Ratcliffe was in Congress, he was a big advocate for declassifying this stuff. And I think Rick Grenell has created the environment by which Ratcliffe can accelerate these activities. There are many more documents that need to be released. Just last week, Tom's group, Judicial Watch, did a fantastic job in getting us the original electronic communication that opened up the Russia case. And when you see that, you realize it's a laughable document. There was no basis to even start the Russia investigation.
I think the expression was not in a million years should it have occurred, Tom, which, by the way, is what President Trump was saying throughout. And yet there doesn't seem to be remorse. There does not seem to be any shame or embarrassment. They just plod on, saying, well, you know, that was then and this is now, and the hell with the American citizens and their right to know, and oh, yes, the Constitution. This is outrage to me that the stain remains at DOJ, the FBI, and parts of the intelligence community. What do you think will be done? Tom?
This was part of a seditious coup. Let's be clear. They were desperate to get Trump. They ambushed General Flynn in the White House, an attack on the president's ability to conduct foreign policy. It was an attack on the presidency. You know, my concern is that Comey's been let off, McCabe's been let off, and I don't just see any evidence that the senior leadership behind this coup is going to be prosecuted, let alone even seriously questioned at this point. It's disturbing. The president should appoint, as I've been saying, a special counsel separately, because the DOJ just can't do it.
The president has just spoken. He was at an event, not a general news event, but speaking with the reporters, at least briefly. This is what he had to say about General Flynn.
Yeah, I'd like to hear it, too. I mean, I'd like to hear it. The FBI, as you know, said that he didn't lie. And certainly the conversation, almost regardless, it was a good conversation. He was allowed to do it. And the Mueller people, who are have been proven very bad things they did. Very bad things. A lot of bad things are being found out about the hoax.
John, your reaction to the president's remarks?
You know, if he said them 3 years ago, people would have laughed at him. But the truth of the matter is, all this disclosure, all the great work by Tom Fitton, all the great work by the members of Congress, we now can see this was a ruse from the beginning. It was a partisan, political or a personal attack on the president, trying to thwart his presidency, misusing the most powerful intelligence and criminal enforcement, law enforcement tools we had. And the president is right. There were some bad people who did some very bad things.
And none of them have been brought to account, Tom. And as John reminds us, the national left-wing media, the radical Dems mocking the president when he said he was being wiretapped. It's just inconceivable what has happened to this president at the hands of a politically corrupt FBI, Department of Justice, as I said, a couple of very bad chiefs of Obama-era intelligence agencies.
Yeah, Mueller was the hammer for the deep state here. And remember, the abuse of General Flynn, the prosecution occurred under Mueller. The president should presume all those prosecutions and investigations are suspect and tainted and should pardon everyone involved, irrespective of how the courts handle them. Manafort, Stone, and of course General Flynn, who was innocent. Jeff Sessions, I know, had been in a debate with President Trump. Jeff Sessions didn't need to recuse himself, and once he did and saw what was going on, he should have unrecused himself to stop the carnage in the Justice Department. He didn't. It was a terrible lapse in judgment, to put it charitably.
John, you get the last quick word, if you would.
It's hard to follow that. It was a pretty good argument. Yeah, listen, people are going to look back at this period of time and really regret what the FBI and Justice Department did. The real question is, can we prevent it from happening again? And only punishment and accountability will prevent it from happening again.
That's right.
Amen. To you both, Tom Fitton, John Solomon. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll be right back with much more. Stay with us.